From an unforgettable adventure, like a long-awaited vacation on the Azure coast under the shade of palm trees, life could be wonderful. However, imagine going on your wedding trip only to be accused of committing a real crime. Would the honeymoon be as bright and carefree in such a case? Unforgettable, of course, but in a different way. Isabella Rodriguez, later known as Hellman, was born in 1975 in Colombia, a country where everyone speaks Spanish. Yet Isabella dreamt of the American dream. She bought books in English, listened to songs on the radio, all to learn the language and leave for North America. Although she managed to learn the language, her southern accent stayed with her forever. Nevertheless, this did not stop her from moving to Florida, getting a job as a real estate agent and helping people who spoke only Spanish with renting or buying homes. In 2002, Isabella, though not exactly lucky, married William Hellman. Despite living in marriage for 10 years, their union was filled with continuous quarrels and domestic disputes. Finally, when their patience burst, they filed for divorce. The divorce process lasted a very long time, 2 years. During these 2 years, Isabella found a new man, Bennett, with whom she hoped to find happiness. Lewis was originally from Great Britain, but moved to Australia as a child, gaining dual citizenship. He graduated from the prestigious Camborne School of Mines, but never worked in his specialty. Instead, he returned to Australia and opened his own successful solar panel manufacturing company, eventually entering the American market. With his main office in Florida, Lewis started looking for a wife online. For a long time, Lewis had no luck in love online. He flipped through profiles, uninterested in those who reached out first. However, when he saw Isabella's photo, she reminded him of Jennifer Lopez, and he decided to write to her. They corresponded frequently. Isabella shared her dreams of moving to America, her efforts to learn the language, her job searches, and even her past relationships. Bennett was not put off by her ongoing divorce, as it was only a matter of time. Tired of past relationships and a draining divorce, Isabella took the initiative to meet in person. She traveled to be with Lewis wherever he was, England, Australia, or even Thailand. Lewis, wanting to impress his new love, bought a catamaran to fulfill his childhood dream of traveling the Caribbean Sea. His favorite book was Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, which perhaps foreshadowed a significant role in his life. Isabella spent all her free time, whether it was a vacation or a long weekend, traveling with Lewis. She noticed that during these trips, Bennett barely worked. He joked or seriously claimed he had a huge inheritance, so there was nothing to worry about. Isabella accepted his explanation. In July 2016, the couple celebrated the birth of their first child, Amelia. However, this joyous event also marked the beginning of their first serious disagreements. Due to her past experiences, Isabella found these conflicts particularly difficult. They could not agree on how to raise their daughter or in which country she would be better off growing up. Lewis insisted with all his might that Amelia grew up in Australia next to his parents, while Isabella, on the contrary, did not want to leave America. Finally, the young father gave in, and in 2017, the whole family moved to Florida. There, despite already having a daughter, they decided to finally get married. Isabella begged her now husband to go on a honeymoon, as she hoped that this sea voyage would bring them back to the state when they first got to know each other, carefree sailing around the islands on the high seas on his catamaran. Lewis heard his wife's whims and promised her that there would definitely be a honeymoon, but a little later. Lewis wasn't lying. In late April 2017, he returned from Australia, and the couple headed out on their romantic cruise. At first, judging by the posts on social media, everything was indeed as Isabella wanted. In all the photos, they are smiling, clasping each other in their arms, and traveling around the Caribbean islands. However, then after those endless honeymoon photos, a lull began. A long one for 2 weeks. When Isabella reappeared online, she told her family that she and her husband were in Cuba and were planning to return to Florida, but didn't know which way yet. She also added that they had a very bad connection there, so in the next few days, they might not expect a call from her. On the night of May 15th, the Coast Guard received a call for help from Lewis. He said he was alone on a raft in the open sea. Rescuers immediately went in search of him. The man was found near the Bahamas, indeed alone on a boat that was filled to the top with various things and provisions. On the shore, Lewis told the following story. On May 14th, after a tiring day, he asked Isabella to give him a few hours of rest, and entrusting his wife with the management of the catamaran, went to take a nap in the cabin. Lewis was awakened by a heavy thump from below, and he called out to his wife, but she did not respond. Then he went upstairs, looked around, and realized that Isabella was nowhere on board, and the very blow that had awakened him had created a hole in the bottom of the catamaran through which water began to enter his vessel, and the boat began to sink. Lewis decided that his wife was simply carried overboard by the blow, and since she was wearing a vest, she was fine. In order not to go down with his child, he gathered all his belongings and moved to the rescue boat. Meanwhile, the rescuers, having taken a look at the contents of Lewis's life raft, were surprised as the man took only those things that belonged to him, as if he had no hope that his beloved Isabella was alive and would soon be found. He even brought his tea set with him. Also, in his backpack were found aluminum tubes inside which were hidden silver coins, but this discovery was not paid attention to because it was necessary to move urgently to search for Isabella. The Coast Guard used absolutely all the equipment they had, including helicopters, and surveyed the entire area, but all to no avail. They found the very catamaran, which, according to Lewis's statements, crashed on underwater rocks. But there were no underwater rocks or reefs in the vicinity, nor had the boat itself gone completely to the bottom. It was decided to inspect the boat. For this purpose, several divers were sent to it. Again, the results of their examination did not coincide with Lewis's story. As I said earlier, there were no underwater rocks at the wreck site. The boat simply could not have collided with anything, and the holes that were on the bottom were made from inside the boat, not outside. Another literally shocking oddity in this case was that the boat had all the escape hatches open, which of course increased the rate of sinking of the catamaran. Lewis mentioned in his story that he left the boat over the side, as he was supposed to. The fact is that escape hatches are strictly forbidden to be opened, and they are needed only when there is no other way to leave the sinking vessel. Also, Lewis, being an experienced seafarer, did not use a beacon or satellite phone, which would have helped rescuers find travelers in time in case of disaster. That is, from the outside, it looked as if Lewis deliberately sank the ship and made it look like an accident. But then where is his wife? On May 17th, the search for Isabella continued, although 120 hours had passed since the catamaran wreck, while the possibility of finding a woman alive in the middle of the open sea is only 13 hours. On May 18th, the search stopped. Isabella has not been found to this Isabella, and what's more, he bought just one ticket to Australia for May 19th. He didn't even hope that the rescue team would be able to find his wife, dead or alive, but he tried his best to get his wife's death certificate as soon as possible so that he could get the insurance he was entitled to as a close relative. This was denied after the insurance company refused. Lewis visited Isabella's parents and tried to take his daughter away from them. They blamed him for Isabella's death and did not want to give Amelia away. He was able to take his daughter only after calling the police. On May 28th, he left Amelia with his parents in the UK and returned to Florida to try again to get the insurance payment, which by law was entitled to him. To the police, Lewis's behavior seemed extremely suspicious. They were literally sure that he was to blame for his wife's disappearance, but they had no evidence. Even the catamaran on which the murder could theoretically have taken place, and on which it was possible to find evidence confirming it, had gone to the bottom to a great depth, and it was impossible to get it out of there. But the search of the house where Lewis and Isabella lived, as well as Lewis's own cell phone, proved fruitful. Yes, the fact that the husband and wife could not communicate with each other for weeks, and the husband himself could periodically disappear from home and not appear there for a long time, is not considered any evidence. But the fact that in the house were found recording devices on which Isabella recorded constant threats from her husband already pushed the investigation to the idea that not everything in their relationship was smooth. Judging by these records, Lewis repeatedly promised to kill his wife. Isabella even told her friends about it and shared with them that she wanted to leave her fierce husband and cruel tyrant, but only tried one more time, now the last, to save their relationship. But as we already know, she never succeeded. The main reason for quarrels were debts. Lewis, real estate, electricity, credit cards. He literally drowned in debt, and getting out of this pit seemed impossible. Moreover, he did not try to solve his problems, but only continued to travel on his catamaran, still did not work anywhere, and in addition spent some of the rest of his savings on such things as Thai boxing lessons in Thailand. Of course, Isabella didn't like it, and in the meantime, Lewis even forced his wife to give up child rearing and get a job so that she could pay off his debts while he was doing more important things. Looking into Lewis Bennett's debts, the investigation also found that between 2014 and 2016, the man engaged in international transfers totaling about $160,000. As it turned out, the very coins that rescuers found in Lewis's backpack were very rare and collectible. Later, the investigation will establish that the coins were stolen in 2016. One of Lewis's acquaintances, who at that time was a member of the crew of the ship Kitty, and when the crew went to town, this acquaintance stole the coins and gave them to Lewis for further resale. Yes, it was for smuggling that the investigation managed to put Lewis behind bars because, during a search of the house, in addition to those tape recordings, the police found some of the coins. For smuggling, Lewis received 7 months in prison. There, while behind bars, the man also received a second charge just for the involuntary manslaughter of his wife. The investigation carefully checked all the facts that they had on their hands, and which they so scrupulously collected piece by piece, and came to the conclusion that during their trip, Isabella found in her husband's things those very collectible coins, and between them there was a scandal. But it was not entirely clear whether Isabella had been killed on the boat or in the water. During the quarrel, quite fiery and somewhere even cruel, husband could either not calculate the force of the blow or throw the woman into the water and then do not provide her with any help. And so Isabella drowned while her husband watched her torment being on board. During the tragedy, Lewis realized that his wife's death was a good thing for him, and if he made it look like a sinking boat accident, he would get an additional payout for the sinking catamaran, in addition to the money for Isabella's death, since it was also considered an insured event. But only the whole story on the part of the prosecution was just a fantasy of the grief-stricken relatives. Lewis was never charged with premeditated murder for lack of evidence. He was offered a deal that if he pleaded guilty, he would only get 8 years. Lewis accepted, but should he have agreed to it if he really is not guilty? And all the evidence against him is only a tape recorder where he threatens his wife. Lewis accepted, but should he have agreed to it if he really is not guilty? And all the evidence against him is only a tape recorder where he threatens his wife that otherwise Lewis Bennett would serve the rest of his time for the smuggling article and be released very soon in November 2018. Lewis Bennett received 8 years in prison, and all of the insurance payments and all of his wife's assets which he had claimed and for which he had arranged, all of this will go to Amelia. Also, the court ordered Lewis to pay monetary compensation for his daughter, who had not yet experienced serious psychological trauma while growing up. Thank you for watching the entire video. Hello, and see you again in the new video.